Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you for taking time to listen to some of my thoughts that relate to the wondrous field of psychology. I want to thank Dr. Alvin Nigg and all in the psychology department at Sunway University. And it's marvelous that they've organized under Dr. Alvin's supervision a psychology month, because it is such a vital field. It offers so much, not only to people suffering from extreme disturbance, psychiatric disorders. Of course, it's immensely helpful to many of those individuals suffering in those ways, but also for those of us who want to minimize misery in our lives and maximize joy, and who don't realize that it's not our circumstances that create our emotions, but what we tell ourselves about the circumstances that create our emotions. And the area, the psychotherapeutic approach in psychology that I teach, that I practice, and that has principles that I attempt every day to live by, is called Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, which heralded in the cognitive revolution in psychology. You know, cognitive behavior therapy and ACT, DBT, other approaches really stand on the shoulders of REBT that first was presented in the early 1950s. Anyway, one of the questions that many people ask me, or it's more of a statement and then a question, I'm just very emotional, you know, and I can't help it. And that's just the way I am. And REBT asserts that one of the blessings, the privileges of being a human being is that we can feel emotions unless we're impaired in some way or another. And one of the many gifts of REBT is it's teaching us the difference between irrational thinking, which creates debilitating and unhealthy emotions, and rational thinking, which creates healthy, enriching emotions, even though some of them may not be pleasant, but they're enriching, they're motivating. And so it's a fallacy to think, well, I'm just emotional and I can't do anything about it, when the fact of the matter is, when we recognize the unhealthy negative emotions, emotions that we create when we think in irrational ways, when bad things happen, when challenging times are here, like the pandemic at this time in our lives, or at the time I'm recording this. Maybe you're watching this in 10 years and the pandemic was in the past. This is 2022. Anyway, so if we think in those irrational ways, we create those debilitating emotions that include hopelessness, depression, despondency, anxiety, panic, extreme fear, rage, shame, and guilt. And we have a choice, because if we recognize it's not the event, but how we're thinking about it, we can identify the thoughts, dispute them, and come up with rational thinking, which creates the healthy negative not bad, but unpleasant, healthy negative emotions, the counterparts. So the healthy negative emotion, rather than unhealthy anxiety and panic, is concern. It motivates us. It doesn't debilitate us. Also, instead of hopelessness and despondency and depression, we experience healthy grief, sadness, disappointment. It is healthy to grieve when someone we love dies, or a period of our lives that we cherish is over for one reason or another. Grief is married to our love of and our gratitude for that or whom we have lost. So it's healthy. It's part of the tapestry of healthy human emotions. Then when we think in healthy ways, instead of debilitating rage, which makes things hardly better and often worse, Moral anger, where we're still in control of our actions. We don't blindly react. We think things through and choose our actions, but it's connected to our moral compass and can motivate us to reflect on what might I do to correct this situation that's cruel, brutal, bad, immoral. If possible, let me do something to change it. But we're enraged, we don't think things through in that way. And then instead of shame and guilt, which many people experience in addition to hopelessness if they attempt suicide, by thinking in rational ways, we experience regret. That way we can reflect on every human is fallible. But just because we fail at something doesn't make us failures. Just because we did a bad thing as a fallible human, we did a mistake, doesn't make us bad or mistakes. Wish you'd never been born sort of attitude. REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, reminds us that every human has worth simply because we exist. And it encourages us to take responsibility, not only for our thinking and feelings, but for our actions. And so sure, think about anything we've done that hasn't been a good thing, but that doesn't mean we're a bad thing. And in that way, we're likely not only to prevent ourselves from doing it again, but it can give us more compassion and forgiveness for other humans who might act badly. You see, so when someone says, I'm too emotional, I would want to clarify, well, healthy emotional or unhealthy emotional? And then remind them, if it's unhealthy, how's this impacting your life? Is it helping you? And if not, then I would encourage them to learn to think in those rational ways instead of irrational thinking, shoulds, demands, oughts, absolutistic thinking, overgeneralizing, no sense of humor, blowing things out of perspective, low frustration tolerance. In other words, I must have what I want, when I want it, and damning oneself and others and life itself when things don't go the way we think they should. Oh, and awfulizing and catastrophizing, in other words, thinking it's the worst it could be, when in fact, if we're still alive, it's not the worst it could be. And where there's life, there is hope. There are enough examples of people who have literally survived hellish situations, you know, in war times, in prison, and have survived and then thrived. And I can't think of one person who I know of, both public people and in my personal life, who thrived, who thought in irrational ways. Sure, they still felt grief about the bad things that happened, but they didn't ruminate too much on that. And more than that, they thought about what they could be grateful for. So we have the power to create our own emotional destinies. And REBT and other approaches guide us, coach us, encourage us, and teach the how-tos for doing so. Now, another question that often arises is therapy really just for people with psychiatric disorders or really kind of debilitating emotions? And the answer is no, 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 no. REBT in particular, and it's not the only psychotherapeutic approach that's also a way of life, but it's my favorite, so I'm talking about it. And in my view, frankly, and you know, I teach at Columbia, I teach a semester on REBT, and at the same time, I teach a whole course during the semester on comparative psychotherapies. And in my view, and I admit it might be biased, but I do believe that REBT is the most holistic of all the approaches I know of. It's scientific, evidence-based, the initial cognitive approach, but it's imbued with compassion. It encourages compassion for oneself, and others and life, unconditional self, unconditional other, and unconditional life acceptance when things don't go the way we prefer. And so the fact of the matter is that we're biological creatures living in a natural world, and for most people in their lifetime, there will be loss and suffering of one sort or another. And so if individuals are not taught how to think in rational ways and through willpower, muster up their willpower to identify the thinking that's creating the debilitating emotion, and then to dispute it and replace it and repeat and repeat and repeat those healthy new beliefs till they become our automatic go-tos. So therapy can be so helpful in helping people who aren't severely emotionally disturbed or disabled. It can be an effective short-term therapy, and then the people who benefit from that can be their own therapists, can use the approach as a self-help way of living. And sure, there's a little relapse, that's quite common. You can go see your therapist again. So something like REBT is not only a brilliant psychotherapeutic approach, it's a way of life. In addition to the things I've mentioned, it encourages us to practice daily gratitude, not only when days are going well, but especially when things are challenging. And you know, research has shown that there are articles published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that demonstrate the significant impact on the cardiovascular system of people who practice daily gratitude. They live longer, they tend to live around 15 years longer than people with similar conditions who don't practice daily gratitude. So if you want to live longer and healthier lives, it's a great idea. Now, for some people, just reading a book by Albert Ellis, or me and Albert Ellis, or any one of the wonderful authors, Marty Seligman, Positive Psychology, Aaron, I mean, it would take too long to go over, but to feed our mind and learn the principles and then act on them and live them and help other people and be sensitive about the needs of this planet. And in so doing, we make the gift, the privilege of being a human being in this changeable world that has no certainty, but so many things of awe and wonder. We can live better lives and help other people do so too. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I wish you well. I'm grateful.